I found my basement submerged in 3 inches of ice-cold water on a Tuesday morning in March, and the smell of mildew already starting to creep into the drywall told me this wasn't the first time it had happened. I stood at the bottom of the stairs in my socks, watching the water lap against the legs of my workbench, and felt my stomach drop. My name is William Yates, and I had just bought this house in Boulder, Colorado 6 months ago. It was supposed to be my dream home, a cozy 3-bedroom craftsman in the Meadowbrook Hills neighborhood with mountain views and what the realtor had called exceptional drainage. That last part was clearly a lie. I waded through the frigid water to check the walls, looking for cracks in the foundation or burst pipes. Everything seemed intact from what I could tell. The water wasn't spraying from anywhere. It was just there, pooling across the entire basement floor like someone had dumped a small swimming pool into my house. I climbed back upstairs and grabbed my phone to call a plumber, then thought better of it. First, I needed to figure out where this water was actually coming from. Outside, the late winter sun was already melting the massive snowbanks that had accumulated over the past few weeks. Colorado had gotten hammered this year, more snow than we'd seen in a decade. The whole neighborhood looked like a winter wonderland, except for the fact that all that white stuff was now turning into thousands of gallons of runoff. I walked around the perimeter of my house, examining the ground. The soil was saturated, practically spongy under my boots. But it was when I reached the back corner of my property that I saw it. A wall. A brand new retaining wall made of stacked concrete blocks, maybe 4 feet high, running along the property line between my yard and the common area behind the houses. I stared at it, confused. That wall definitely hadn't been there when I moved in. I would have noticed. It effectively created a dam, and all the snowmelt from the higher elevation common area was being redirected straight toward my house instead of flowing down the natural grade of the hillside. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. The water was visibly flowing down from the melting snow above, hitting the wall, and then coursing along it until it found the path of least resistance, which happened to be straight into the ground around my foundation. I could actually see where the earth was eroded in a channel leading right to my basement wall. Unbelievable, I muttered, snapping photo after photo. This wasn't just bad luck or an act of God. Someone had deliberately built a structure that was flooding my house. I marched back inside and dug through the pile of mail I'd been ignoring for the past week. Somewhere in there was the Meadowbrook Hills HOA newsletter and contact information. I found it buried under some pizza coupons and a flyer for gutter cleaning. The HOA president was listed as Patricia Hendricks. Of course, I'd met Patricia exactly once at a mandatory new homeowner orientation meeting where she'd spent 45 minutes explaining the 17 different shades of beige that were acceptable for house trim colors. She had the kind of hair that defied both gravity and good taste, teased into a blonde helmet that probably required half a can of hairspray daily. Her voice had that particular quality of someone who truly believed that volume equals authority. I dialed the number listed. It rang 4 times before a sharp voice answered. Meadowbrook Hills, HOA, Patricia speaking. Hi, Patricia. This is William Yates from 847 Cascade Drive. I'm calling because my basement is flooded, and I think it might have something to do with the new retaining wall that was built behind my property. There was a pause. The drainage improvement project, yes, what about it? What about it? It's directing all the snowmelt straight into my foundation. I have 3 inches of water in my basement right now. That's not possible, Patricia said, her tone suggesting I was either lying or stupid. The wall was specifically designed to improve drainage in the common area. We hired a contractor and everything. Well, it's improving the drainage away from the common area and right into my house. I need someone to come look at this immediately. Mr. Yates, I'm sure you're upset, but I can't just dispatch someone every time a homeowner has a maintenance issue. Have you considered that your basement might be flooding due to poor maintenance on your part? When was the last time you checked your sump pump? I felt my jaw clench. 2 weeks ago. It's working fine. The problem isn't my house, it's the wall that's diverting water toward my foundation. This is an HOA project that's damaging my property. I'll make a note of your complaint and bring it up at the next board meeting. That's scheduled for the 15th of next month. Next month? Patricia, my basement is underwater right now. I can't wait a month. The board meets monthly, Mr. Yates. That's how associations work. In the meantime, I suggest you contact a waterproofing company. I have someone I can recommend if you'd like. I want someone from the HOA to come look at this wall today. That's not going to be possible. I have a hair appointment this afternoon, and the other board members all have jobs. We're volunteers, you know. We don't get paid for this. I'm not asking you to volunteer. I'm asking you to take responsibility for a structure that your association built that's damaging my property. Patricia's voice went up an octave. Mr. Yates, I don't appreciate your tone. The HOA has done nothing wrong. We followed all proper procedures. If you're experiencing flooding, that's between you and your insurance company. This is ridiculous. That wall needs to be modified or removed. I've made a note of your complaint. Good day. She hung up. I stared at my phone, anger surging through me. I'd dealt with difficult people before, but Patricia had elevated it to an art form. She'd managed to be dismissive, condescending, and completely unhelpful all in under 5 minutes. I called my insurance company next. After navigating through the automated system that seemed designed to make humans give up and accept their fate, I finally reached a real person named David, who listened to my explanation. Okay, Mr. Yates, I'm going to open a claim for you and get an adjuster out there as soon as possible. Can you describe the damage? I gave him the rundown. Standing water in the basement, damaged boxes of belongings, potentially compromised drywall and flooring. David made sympathetic noises and assured me someone would call within 24 hours to schedule an inspection. In the meantime, I needed to deal with the water. I called a restoration company that specialized in flood cleanup. They arrived 3 hours later with industrial pumps and dehumidifiers, 2 guys named Marcus and Tony, who took one look at my basement and shook their heads in sympathy. Yeah, you got hit pretty good, Marcus said, already setting up equipment. We'll get this water out and set up dryers, but you're going to need to monitor this situation. If the water keeps coming in, we'll just be fighting a losing battle. It's Snowmelt from a retaining wall the HOA built, I explained, showing them the photos on my phone. Tony whistled. Man, that's bad. That's definitely going to keep flooding as long as the snow keeps melting. You might want to get a lawyer. It might come to that. They worked for the rest of the afternoon, and by evening my basement was at least dry, even if it smelled like a swamp. The dehumidifiers hummed away, and Marcus showed me where to empty them since they'd be running for days. The bill was $1,800, which I charged to my credit card with gritted teeth. Insurance would hopefully reimburse me, but that was money I hadn't planned on spending. The next morning my phone rang at 8. It was Jennifer from my insurance company, the claims adjuster assigned to my case. She could come by that afternoon if I was available. I told her any time worked for me. Jennifer turned out to be a short woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She walked around my property with a tablet, taking notes and photos, asking detailed questions. When I showed her the retaining wall, her eyebrows went up. When was this constructed? Sometime in the last few months. I moved in 6 months ago and it wasn't here then. I didn't get any notice about it. And you've confirmed this is HOA property? It's in the common area. The HOA president admitted they built it when I called her yesterday. Jennifer took several photos from different angles, then crouched down to examine where the water was flowing. This is clearly directing water toward your foundation. Do you have the contact information for the HOA? I gave her everything I had. Patricia's number, the HOA mailing address, the management company information. Jennifer added it all to her tablet. Here's how this is going to work, Mr. Yates. We're going to cover the damage to your property under your policy. However, this appears to be a case of third-party liability. The HOA's actions directly caused the flooding. Once we pay your claim, we're going to pursue subrogation. Subrogation? We sue them to recover what we paid out. It's standard procedure when someone else's negligence causes damage that insurance covers. You won't have to do anything except provide documentation if we need it. For the first time since I'd found the water, I felt a small sense of relief. So, insurance will cover everything? Subject to your deductible and policy limits, yes. I'll send a contractor out to assess the full damage and cost of repairs. Document everything, keep all your receipts, and don't sign anything from the HOA without consulting us first. Trust me, the HOA hasn't offered anything except attitude. Jennifer gave me a thin smile. That's about to change. Over the next week, things moved quickly. The insurance contractor came out and estimated nearly $12,000 in damage. The drywall in the basement had wicked up moisture and needed to be replaced. The carpet was ruined. Several boxes of my belongings that I'd stored down there were destroyed, including some irreplaceable photos and documents from my late father. The wooden workbench I'd been refinishing was warped beyond repair. It was devastating to see the extent of it all laid out in a report. The insurance company approved the claim minus my $1,000 deductible. They also sent a formal letter to the HOA, which I got a copy of, informing them that they would be pursuing recovery of the full amount paid plus the deductible. The letter was coldly professional and outlined exactly how the retaining wall had altered the natural drainage pattern and caused damage to my property. It gave the HOA 30 days to respond. I didn't hear anything from Patricia for exactly 3 weeks. Then, on a Saturday morning, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Patricia standing on my porch, dressed in a velour tracksuit that was probably considered fashionable in 2003. Behind her stood 2 men I didn't recognize. "Mr. Yates," Patricia said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I hope we're not catching you at a bad time. This is Roger Blanchard and Tom Northrup, 2 other members of our HOA board. We wanted to discuss this insurance matter with you." I crossed my arms. "Come in, I guess." They filed into my living room. Patricia sat on my couch like she owned the place, smoothing her tracksuit with manicured hands. Roger was a tall, thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who kept glancing around nervously. Tom was shorter, muscular, with a permanent scowl that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. "So," Patricia began, "we received this very aggressive letter from your insurance company making some quite serious accusations." "Accusations? My basement flooded because of the wall you built. That's not an accusation, that's a fact. That's your interpretation. Our contractor assured us the wall was built to code and would improve drainage. It improved drainage away from the common area and into my house." Roger cleared his throat. "Mr. Yates, we understand you're upset, but the HOA has limited funds. We can't just pay out thousands of dollars every time someone has a maintenance issue." "This isn't a maintenance issue. This is damage directly caused by an HOA construction project." Tom finally spoke up, his voice gravelly. "Look, we're trying to work with you here. What if we paid your deductible, $1,000, and we call it even? No lawyers, no insurance companies, just neighbors helping neighbors." I laughed without humor. "You're joking, right? The total damage is over $13,000. Your wall did that. Why would I accept a fraction of what I'm owed?" Patricia's fake smile disappeared. "Because if you don't, we're going to fight this. We have a lawyer too, Mr. Yates. A very good one who works on HOA matters. This could drag on for years. Is that really what you want?" "What I want is for you to take responsibility and either modify that wall so it stops flooding my house or tear it down completely. I also want compensation for the damage already done." "The wall stays," Tom said flatly. "It cost the HOA $15,000 to build. We're not tearing down a brand new structure." "Then you're going to keep paying for the damage it causes. My insurance company already told me they're pursuing this." Patricia stood up abruptly. "Fine. If that's how you want to play it, Mr. Yates, we'll see you in court. But let me remind you that you're still a member of this HOA. You still have to follow our rules and pay your dues. It would be a shame if we had to start issuing fines for every little violation we might happen to notice around your property. Are you threatening me? I'm reminding you of your obligations. Come on, gentlemen. We're wasting our time here." They left, and I shut the door harder than necessary. My hands were shaking with anger. The audacity of coming to my house and offering a fraction of the damages, then threatening me with fines when I refused, was breathtaking. I immediately called Jennifer at the insurance company and told her about the visit. "They did what?" Jennifer sounded genuinely surprised. "Mr. Yates, don't accept any offers from them, and definitely don't agree to anything in writing. What they're doing could actually strengthen our case. They're essentially admitting liability by trying to settle. They also threatened to fine me for HOA violations if I don't back off. Document that. Write down exactly what was said while it's fresh in your memory. If they follow through on those threats, that's retaliation, and it's illegal in most states, Colorado included. I spent an hour writing down every detail of the conversation, including the exact words Patricia had used. Then I went outside to inspect my property with a critical eye. My lawn was neat, my house paint was an approved color, my trash cans were stored in the garage. Everything was in compliance with the HOA's extensive rules, which I'd unfortunately read thoroughly when I moved in. But I knew Patricia would find something. People like her always did. Sure enough, 2 days later, I got a certified letter from the HOA. I'd violated Section 7.3 of the community guidelines by parking my car on the street overnight instead of in my driveway. Fine, $150. I stared at the letter in disbelief. I'd parked on the street once, for maybe 6 hours, because I'd been rearranging my garage. It was the pettiest thing I could imagine. I called Jennifer again. She told me to pay the fine under protest and document everything. "They're building our case for us," she said. "Keep records of all of this." The harassment continued. Over the next 3 weeks, I received 4 more violation notices. My trash can was visible from the street at 10 a.m. on a non-trash day, even though I'd brought it in from the morning pickup at 9:30. My front door wreath was not an approved seasonal decoration. A small stain on my driveway from when I'd changed my oil needed to be pressure washed immediately. My doorbell camera captured someone walking up to my house at odd hours, taking photos. The figure was unmistakable. Patricia, usually in one of her signature velour tracksuits, documenting any possible violation. I started taking my own photos. Patricia inspecting my property. The timestamps on my doorbell footage showing her visits. Every violation notice cross-referenced with photographic evidence showing compliance. I created a folder on my computer labeled HOA harassment and filled it with documentation. Meanwhile, spring arrived in full force. The snowmelt continued, and despite the restoration company's best efforts, my basement got damp again. Not flooded like before, but enough moisture seeping in that I had to run dehumidifiers constantly. My electricity bill doubled. I called Jennifer to report it, and she sent the contractor back out. More damage, more costs adding up. The insurance company's legal team sent a second letter to the HOA, this one more aggressive. They'd investigated the property records and found that the HOA had never obtained a permit for the retaining wall. Boulder County required permits for any structure over 3 feet that altered drainage patterns. The wall was 4 feet and definitely altered drainage. This was now not just a civil matter, but a code violation. I got a gleeful phone call from Jennifer. "Mr. Yates, this just got a lot more interesting. The county is going to require them to either get a retroactive permit, which they probably can't get because the wall doesn't meet code, or remove it. Either way, our case just got much stronger." When will I know what happens? The county gave them 60 days to respond. But here's the thing. If they have to remove the wall, they'll likely try to settle with us quickly to avoid admission of wrongdoing becoming public record. I don't want to settle unless they pay for everything and remove the wall. That's your choice. But remember, you're not technically a party to this lawsuit. We are. We'll consult with you, of course, but ultimately the insurance company decides whether to settle or proceed. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. This was my house, my property being damaged, but I'd essentially handed control over to the insurance company by filing a claim. Still, what choice did I have? I couldn't afford to hire my own lawyer and fight the HOA independently. 3 days after the county sent their notice to the HOA, I came home from work to find my front yard dug up. Not a little bit. A massive trench had been excavated along my property line, exposing pipes and cable lines. There was an HOA notice staked in the ground, explaining that they were performing emergency utility maintenance in the common area. I called the non-emergency police line, furious. An officer named Detective Harrison came out and looked at the situation. He was an older guy with gray hair and the tired expression of someone who'd seen it all. "Do they have a right to dig here?" he asked me. "I have no idea. There was no notice except this stake, and I don't see any broken utilities. This is clearly retaliation." "Retaliation for what?" I explained the whole situation. The wall, the flooding, the insurance lawsuit, the harassment. Detective Harrison took notes and looked increasingly interested. "That's a civil matter mostly, but if they're damaging your property without proper notice or cause, That could be criminal mischief. Have you documented all of this? Extensively. Good. Keep doing that. I'm going to file a report and have a conversation with your HOA president. If this is harassment, there are laws against that. Colorado takes property rights seriously. He left, and I stood in my torn-up yard feeling a mix of anger and vindication. Patricia had gone too far. Whatever game she thought she was playing, she'd just involved law enforcement. The next day, I got a call from a lawyer named Stephen Worth. He introduced himself as counsel for Meadowbrook Hills HOA and said he wanted to arrange a mediation. Mr. Yates, I think there's been a lot of misunderstanding and heightened emotions on both sides. My clients are willing to sit down and discuss a reasonable resolution. Is filling in the trench in my yard part of that reasonable resolution? There was a pause. I wasn't aware of any excavation. That's news to me. Your client, Patricia Hendricks, authorized digging up my front yard yesterday without notice. The police have been notified. I see. Let me look into that. In the meantime, would you be willing to attend a mediation session? We could potentially resolve this entire matter without further legal action. I told him I'd have to consult with my insurance company, which was the truth. I called Jennifer immediately after hanging up. Don't go to any mediation without us, Jennifer said firmly. This is our lawsuit now, remember? But the fact that they're asking for mediation means they know they're in trouble. The county notice about the permit probably scared them. Let me talk to our legal department and I'll get back to you. 2 hours later, she called back. Okay, we're willing to do mediation, but on our terms. We want full compensation for all damage, including the continuing moisture issues. We want the wall modified or removed, and we want them to stop harassing you. Those are our conditions. The mediation was scheduled for 2 weeks out at a neutral location, a conference room in a downtown Boulder office building. I took the day off work, put on my best suit, and showed up 15 minutes early. Jennifer was already there with another person from the insurance company's legal team, a sharp-dressed woman named Michelle, who specialized in subrogation cases. Patricia arrived with her lawyer, Stephen Worth, who turned out to be a pleasant-looking man in his 50s, with an expensive suit and a calm demeanor. The mediator was a retired judge named Herbert Fleming, who explained the ground rules. This was non-binding, confidential, and designed to see if we could reach an agreement without going to court. We sat on opposite sides of a long table. Patricia wouldn't meet my eyes. She looked different than her usual aggressive self, almost subdued. Stephen did most of the talking for their side. My clients acknowledged that the retaining wall project has had some unintended consequences. They're willing to make modifications to address the drainage issue and compensate Mr. Yates for his deductible and some additional damages. Michelle leaned forward. Let's be clear about what actually happened. Your clients built an unpermitted structure that violated county code and directly caused over $13,000 in damage to our insured's property. They then harassed him with frivolous HOA violations and damaged his property with unauthorized excavation. This isn't unintended consequences. This is negligence, code violation, and possible criminal mischief. Stephen's pleasant expression didn't change. That's one interpretation. Our interpretation is that the wall was built in good faith to address a legitimate drainage concern in the common area. Any impact on Mr. Yates's property was genuinely unintended. The HOA has limited funds and is managed by volunteers. They can't be expected to have the same expertise as professional engineers. Then they shouldn't have built a retaining wall without getting proper permits and professional engineering studies, Michelle shot back. The county has already determined the wall is illegal. That's not in dispute. Judge Fleming held up a hand. Let's focus on resolution. What is your client willing to offer? Stephen consulted some papers. The HOA will pay Mr. Yates $5,000 and modify the wall to include drainage pipes that should alleviate the water issue. In exchange, he agrees to drop all claims and the insurance company withdraws their lawsuit. Not acceptable, Michelle said immediately. First, Mr. Yates isn't a party to our lawsuit, so he can't make us withdraw it. Second, $5,000 doesn't even cover the deductible plus the additional damages. Third, we need a guarantee that this drainage modification will actually work, designed by a licensed professional engineer. Fourth, we need assurance that the harassment stops. Patricia suddenly spoke up, her voice sharp. Harassment! He's the one who sicked his insurance company on us. He's the one who called the county and got us in trouble with the permits. We're just trying to maintain property values in our community. Mrs. Hendricks, Judge Fleming said mildly, you'll have your turn. Please let your attorney speak for you. Patricia's face flushed red, but she stayed quiet. Stephen continued, we're prepared to go to $7,000, but that's really stretching the HOA's budget. Michelle shook her head. The damage exceeds $13,000. That's been documented by a licensed contractor and reviewed by a county inspector. Your clients are liable for the full amount. We're willing to settle for full damages, plus Mr. Yates's deductible, removal or proper modification of the wall by a licensed engineer, cessation of all harassment, and a formal apology to Mr. Yates. That's completely unreasonable, Patricia burst out. You're trying to bankrupt the HOA. Where do you expect us to get that kind of money? That's not our problem, I said, speaking for the first time. You built an illegal wall that damaged my property. Actions have consequences. Patricia turned to me, and the look on her face was pure venom. This is all your fault. If you hadn't complained to the county, we could have worked something out quietly. But no, you had to make a big deal out of everything. You're just a troublemaker who doesn't care about this community. I cared enough to buy a house here. You're the one who built a wall that floods my basement. It's melting snow. That's an act of God, not our fault. It's melting snow being directed into my foundation by your wall. That's your fault, Judge Fleming intervened. Let's take a break. 15 minutes. Everyone cool off. We filed out into the hallway. Jennifer and Michelle reassured me that this was going well. They're desperate, Michelle said. $7,000 is insulting, but the fact that they're offering anything means they know they'll lose if this goes to court. When we reconvened, Stephen had a new offer. $10,000, wall modification by a licensed engineer, and the HOA agrees to not pursue any more violations against Mr. Yates for 6 months, unless there are egregious safety issues. Not good enough, Michelle said. $13,250, that's the documented damage, plus the $1,000 deductible, wall removal or modification certified by an engineer, permanent cessation of retaliatory violations. And they fill in his yard properly where they dug it up. We didn't dig up his yard, Stephen said. That was a utility company issue. I have the HOA notice that was left in the hole, I said. It says emergency utility maintenance, but there was no emergency and no maintenance performed. The hole is still there. Stephen looked at Patricia, who suddenly found the table very interesting. He sighed. Let me talk to my clients privately. They went into a side room for 20 minutes. When they came back, Patricia looked like she'd been crying, her makeup smudged. Stephen sat down heavily. $13,250 for the documented damage. We'll pay the deductible separately. Wall modification, not removal, by a licensed engineer approved by the county. No more violation notices unless there are legitimate code violations. We'll fix the yard. In exchange, the insurance company drops the lawsuit and Mr. Yates signs a release of all claims. Michelle looked at Jennifer, who nodded slightly. We need the engineer's credentials reviewed before we approve them, and the release only covers claims related to this specific incident, not any future damages if the wall modification doesn't work. Agreed. And we need this in writing with a payment timeline, not some vague promise. We'll have a formal settlement agreement drafted within 1 week. The HOA will pay in full within 30 days of signing. Michelle looked at me. Mr. Yates? I thought about it. It was everything I'd asked for except removal of the wall, but if a proper engineer fixed the drainage, that might be enough, and the harassment would stop, at least legally. Okay, but I want to see the engineer's plan before any work is done, and if this doesn't solve the problem, I'm not signing away my rights to future claims. That's acceptable, Stephen said. He actually looked relieved. Patricia still wouldn't look at anyone. Judge Fleming smiled. Excellent. I'll draft a memorandum of understanding for you all to sign today, and you can formalize it in a proper settlement agreement. I'm pleased we could reach a resolution. We signed the memorandum, and I walked out of that conference room feeling lighter than I had in months. It wasn't perfect, but it was closure. Or so I thought. The formal settlement agreement arrived a week later as promised. It was 12 pages of legal language, but the core terms matched what we'd agreed to. I signed it and sent it back. The HOA had 30 days to pay. 2 weeks passed. An engineer named Dr. Robert Chang contacted me and came out to inspect the wall. He was professional and thorough, taking measurements and soil samples. He showed me his credentials. A Ph.D. in civil engineering from CU Boulder, licensed in Colorado for 20 years, specializing in drainage and erosion control. "This is pretty straightforward," Dr. Chang told me. "The wall needs French drains installed behind it to catch the runoff and redirect it to the storm drain system. I'm surprised they didn't include that in the original design. It's basic water management. They didn't use an engineer for the original design." Dr. Chang shook his head. "That explains it. Well, we'll fix it properly. I'll have a plan to the county within a week and we can start work as soon as it's approved." He was true to his word. The plan was submitted, approved, and work began 3 weeks after mediation. A crew spent 4 days digging behind the wall, installing perforated pipes and gravel, and connecting everything to the existing storm drains. When they were done, Dr. Chang walked me through what they'd installed. "The water will now be captured before it reaches the wall and directed down through these pipes to the street drains. Even in heavy runoff, it should handle the volume. I'm certifying this design, so if there are any problems, contact me directly." I shook his hand gratefully. "Thank you. This has been a nightmare." I believe it. HOAs sometimes think they can just do things without proper planning. It causes situations like this. The work was finished. My yard was repaired and actually looked better than before with fresh sod. The mediation deadline was approaching for payment. I'd been checking my mailbox obsessively, waiting for the check. On day 29, nothing. Day 30, nothing. Day 31, I called Michelle at the insurance company. "They haven't paid yet. What happens now?" "We send a demand letter. They have 10 days to comply or we file a lawsuit. The settlement agreement includes that timeline." The demand letter went out. On day 37, still no payment. Michelle called me. "We're filing tomorrow. This is actually better for us because now we can potentially get interest, attorney fees, and possibly punitive damages for breach of the settlement agreement. I just want them to pay what they owe." They will, but they've made this harder on themselves. The lawsuit was filed in Boulder County District Court. I had to be listed as a plaintiff alongside the insurance company since it was my property. Michelle handled everything, but I had to sign affidavits and provide all my documentation. The HOA had 21 days to respond. They missed that deadline too. Michelle filed for default judgment. That finally got their attention. Stephen Worth called and asked for an emergency meeting. We met at his office this time, me and Michelle on one side of his conference table, Stephen and a very different-looking Patricia on the other. Patricia had aged 10 years in the past few months. Her hair wasn't as perfect. She wasn't wearing velour. She looked exhausted and defeated. "My clients don't have the money," Stephen said without preamble. "The HOA's budget is tight. They have reserves, but accessing them requires a vote of the full board and approval from 2/3 of the homeowners. Patricia has been trying to arrange that, but there's resistance." "That's not our problem," Michelle said. "They entered into a settlement agreement. They're obligated to pay." "I understand. But if you push for default judgment, the HOA will have to levy a special assessment on all homeowners. That's very unpopular. Patricia is facing a recall vote. The other board members have resigned." I looked at Patricia. She was staring at her hands. "Why didn't you just pay from the reserves immediately?" I asked. She looked up, and I saw real fear in her eyes. "Because I'd have to admit to the rest of the homeowners what happened, that we built an illegal wall, that we got sued, that we lost. I thought if we could delay and maybe work out a smaller payment—" "You made it worse," I said. "If you'd just taken responsibility from the beginning, this would have cost less and been over months ago." "I know," she said quietly. It was the first time I'd heard her not sound aggressive or condescending. She just sounded tired. "I thought I was protecting the community, the property values, but I made everything worse." Stephen cleared his throat. "We're asking for an extension, 30 days to hold the vote and access the reserves. If we can't pay after that, you can proceed with the judgment." Michelle looked at me. I shrugged. "1 more month, but that's it." The extension was granted by the court. I learned from neighbors that the HOA drama had become the talk of Meadowbrook Hills. There was an emergency homeowners meeting where Patricia had to explain everything. Several neighbors told me they'd had no idea about the wall project or the lawsuit. They were angry at Patricia for not communicating and for the special assessment they'd all have to pay. The vote passed, barely. The reserves were accessed. On day 27 of the extension, a check arrived from the HOA's bank, $14,250. I deposited it immediately and called Michelle. Got it? We're done? Almost. The insurance company will take their $13,250. The $1,000 deductible comes to you. Plus, the court ordered them to pay our attorney fees, which is another $8,000. That should arrive separately. What about Patricia? What about her? What happens to her now? That's up to the HOA. Why do you care? I thought about it. I don't know. She made my life hell for months, but she also looked pretty broken at that last meeting. Some people need to hit bottom before they change. Maybe this is her bottom. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Patricia resigned from the HOA board 2 weeks later. There was a recall vote scheduled, but she quit before it could happen. The new board president was a younger guy named Alex who worked in construction and actually understood building codes. He sent a letter to all homeowners apologizing for the situation and promising better communication and professional oversight for any future projects. Spring turned to summer. The drainage system Dr. Chung installed worked perfectly. Even during a massive thunderstorm in June that dropped 3 inches of rain in 2 hours, my basement stayed completely dry. I finally felt like I could breathe again. I ran into Patricia one day at the grocery store in August. She was in the produce section, looking at tomatoes. I almost turned around and walked away, but something made me approach her. Patricia, she turned, and her face went pale. William, hi. How are you doing? She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. That's a complicated question. I'm not on the board anymore. A lot of the neighbors won't talk to me, but I'm surviving. How's your house? Dry. The drainage fix worked. That's good. That's really good. She paused, selecting a tomato and putting it in her basket. I owe you an apology. A real one, not a court-ordered one. I was wrong about everything. I got so focused on being right and protecting the HOA that I forgot about just being a decent person. I'm sorry for what I put you through. I studied her face. She seemed sincere. Thank you. That means something. For whatever it's worth, I've learned a lot from this, mostly about what not to do. My husband says I should write a book, How to Destroy Your Community in 10 Easy Steps. I found myself smiling slightly. That would be a bestseller in the HOA world. Right? She smiled too, just a little. Anyway, I really am sorry. I hope you enjoy your house. It's a good neighborhood, despite everything. It's getting better. We parted ways, and I finished my shopping thinking about the strangeness of it all. Patricia wasn't a villain in a movie. She was just a person who'd made bad choices and let her ego get in the way of common sense. The fact that she could admit it, even now, said something. The final piece of closure came in September when I got a letter from Stephen Worth. The HOA had officially closed the matter, all payments were made, and he wanted to thank me for my patience during the resolution process. It was professional and bland, exactly what you'd expect from a lawyer wrapping up a case. I filed it away in the folder marked HOA Disaster and tried to move on with my life. My basement was finished with new drywall and flooring, better than it had been before. Insurance had covered it all. I'd even upgraded the carpet to luxury vinyl plank that was waterproof just in case. The restoration company's dehumidifiers were finally gone. The house smelled normal again. One afternoon in October, as I was raking leaves in my front yard, Alex, the new HOA president, stopped by. He was carrying a clipboard and looked slightly nervous. Hey, William, you got a minute? Sure. What's up? So the new board wants to do a comprehensive drainage study of the entire neighborhood. After what happened with your property, we realized we don't actually have good documentation of water flow patterns. We want to hire a professional engineering firm to assess everything and make recommendations. That sounds smart. Yeah, well, it's going to cost money. We're planning to present it at the next homeowners meeting. I was hoping you might be willing to speak about your experience. Not to bash Patricia or anything, but just to explain why this kind of planning matters. I considered it. The last thing I wanted was to relive the whole nightmare publicly. But if it prevented someone else from going through it, maybe it was worth it. I'll think about it. When's the meeting? November 3rd, 6 p.m. at the community center. No pressure, but I think your voice would carry weight. You're the guy who went through this. People respect that you stood your ground. Let me get back to you. After he left, I sat on my porch and thought about it. The whole experience had been exhausting and stressful and expensive, even with insurance covering most of it. But I'd learned some things. I'd learned that HOAs have enormous power over homeowners, but also legal obligations they can't ignore. I'd learned that insurance companies, when they have skin in the game, can be surprisingly effective advocates. I'd learned that documentation matters, that patience matters, and that sometimes the system actually works, even if it takes forever. I also learned that you shouldn't back down when you're right, even if it's easier to just accept a bad situation. That wall had been wrong from the start. If I'd just paid for the repairs myself and moved on, Patricia would have kept building things without permits, and other homeowners would have suffered. Instead, the HOA now had better oversight, professional standards, and a cautionary tale about what happens when you cut corners. The day before the homeowners meeting, I called Alex and told him I'd speak. He sounded relieved and grateful. The community center was packed on November 3rd. Apparently, word had gotten around that there was going to be drama. I recognized most of the faces from around the neighborhood. Patricia wasn't there, which I'd expected. Alex ran the meeting professionally, covering the usual boring stuff first: financials, upcoming maintenance, holiday decoration guidelines. Then he got to the drainage study proposal. He outlined the plan, the cost, and the reasoning. Several homeowners immediately objected to spending $15,000 on engineering studies. That's when Alex called on me. I stood up and introduced myself, though most people already knew who I was. Then I told the story, keeping it factual and unemotional. The flooding, the illegal wall, the damage, the lawsuit, the special assessment they'd all paid because the previous board hadn't done things properly. I'm not here to bash anyone, I said. What's done is done. But I'm here to tell you that trying to save money by skipping professional engineering doesn't save money. It costs way more in the long run. My insurance company paid $13,000 for my damages. The HOA paid another $8,000 in legal fees. Dr. Chang, the engineer who fixed the problem, charged $4,000. That's $25,000 total. If the HOA had hired Dr. Chang from the beginning to design the wall properly, it would have cost maybe $6,000. We spent $19,000 extra because we didn't do it right the first time. The room was silent. Then, an older man in the back raised his hand. So you're saying this drainage study is worth it? I'm saying it's cheaper than the alternative. And if it prevents even one more situation like mine, it pays for itself. The vote was called. The drainage study was approved by a significant majority. After the meeting, several neighbors came up to shake my hand and thank me for speaking out. A few apologized for not being more supportive during the original crisis. I appreciated it, though it didn't change what had happened. Winter came again. Snow fell, the same beautiful Colorado powder that had caused all my problems the year before. But this time, when the snow melted, my basement stayed dry. The French drains behind the wall did their job, channeling thousands of gallons of water away from my foundation and into the storm sewer where it belonged. I stood in my basement one evening in March, exactly a year after I'd first discovered the flooding, and looked around at the pristine space. New walls, new flooring, new shelving installed where the old workbench had been. It was better than before. Not because of the renovations, but because I knew it would stay this way. The problem was solved. My phone buzzed, a text from Jennifer, the insurance adjuster who'd become something of a friend through this whole ordeal. Saw on the news boulders getting hit with snow tonight. Your basement ready? I typed back, bring it on, we're good. And we were. The system worked, the engineering worked, the lessons had been learned, expensive as they were. Meadowbrook Hills HOA was better managed now, with professional oversight and proper procedures. Other homeowners were protected because someone had held the HOA accountable for their mistake. As I climbed the stairs out of my dry, secure basement and locked the door behind me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The nightmare was over. The problem was solved. Justice, in its slow and bureaucratic way, had prevailed, and my house, my investment, my home was safe. That was worth every minute of the fight.